Hello everyone, this is Cheyenne, otherwise known as Quills and Spells, coming back at you with another speed paint. And by popular demand, this speed paint is actually speed paint plus commentary. Yeah, my friends liked the last one that I did and requested that I do more, so here we go. I normally don't bother with commentary too much because I'm not good at talking for like 10 plus minutes, but I figured that it might be a good idea to do commentary for this video at least, because there's a lot of concepts here that I'm kind of trying to do, and I think maybe explaining what I'm trying to do might be helpful. So this video really is just, I guess, a character study. I have this one character, her name is Amelia. I don't use her all that frequently, but I really should. She's gorgeous and fun to draw. And I have her, and I decided for a little bit of a experiment almost. I was going to draw her in 3 different forms, and this is the first one, what is, I guess, the quote-unquote original. That's misleading, actually. This is not what her initial character design is, but in the context of what I'm trying to do, this is the first look that I'm giving her, where it looks very different than what I feel her final character design is. This is more like a plainer Mary Jane type of appearance I'm going for. The general idea is that she doesn't look too remarkable. She's just a relatively plain person. Not a big sense of identity. She's wearing a sort of uniform that's also very plain. I mean, I think you can tell initially that, like, even with just the line art, that it's nothing too fancy. It's very, I guess, business oriented, which makes sense in a larger narrative that I'm not gonna get too boggled down with. She's wearing regular Mary Jane shoes, for Christ's sake. Like, this is very, you know, nothing about her is really made to stand out. But more of what I was trying to experiment with was actually a little bit of color design. For this version, I'm focusing on a lot of relatively darker and desaturated colors, especially compared to like the other 2 pieces that I'm going to get around to. But yeah, a lot of her colors here meant to be a little bit more less interesting, if that makes any sense. Even her hair, which is like normally supposed to be like a bright red, here is toned down to such a degree that it's basically brown. Everything about her is really supposed to be relatively plain, and I try to reinforce that with having like this uniform, and it's all of it very gray, very muted colors. Also, her little nameplate is Iris, and that's narrative things. With the idea being that she isn't really herself right now, which is why she has a different name. Also, larger narrative context. Ooh, yes, now I'm getting into the whole color in my line art, which is a thing I started doing fairly recently. I saw one of my other friends do a little bit of this, not necessarily as complete as the way I do it, but I really liked the concept and I kind of ran with it. And what's really great about it is that it helps like blend the colors a little bit. It makes things, it blends them, but it also helps make certain lines stand out, and it's less harsh. I think it relates a little bit more to being realistic in this cartoony way, Because in real life, we don't have like hard lines between anything. But yeah, so I'm really happy that I started doing that. And now, God, the speed paint is quick, but I guess that's kind of the goddamn point. Moving on to the second version of Amelia, which is essentially the ideal version. This would be her if she got a better say in what she looked like. So, very lush long hair. Her color scheme that we'll see in a few minutes is significantly more saturated than the other versions of her. Because this is also like connecting to a narrative thing that I'll probably never properly get to, her entire outfit is meant to be like this very Greek sort of what an American who did little to no research in Greek culture would imagine a fancy Greek outfit to be, essentially. I'm not above saying that I didn't do any research for this. This was a fun little pet project. But that would kind of feed into this whole theme of it being ideal, this ideal version of her, comparing her to like this ancient sort of beauty that she, I guess, inspires to have. But I also liked doing the dress like this because it was surprisingly easy. I guess because dresses just have fewer lines. But yeah. And then we see that she has like super long flowing hair. Like obviously we left the first part, so I can't really go back and show you right now, although you can click back if you wanted to. Even though she looks remarkably different than the previous version, certain things like the way her hair was starting to like curve in the previous attempt, in this version it's just like an exaggerated version of that. So yeah, now we're getting over to the fancy coloring section, and I thought it would be really neat to give her like a million freckles. And as you can probably tell, I'm not doing these freckles individually. I actually have a freckle brush that sort of does it for me. It can be a little bit light initially, which is why I tend to go over an area with the freckle brush once, and then I'll duplicate the layer, and if it comes out a little bit too strong, I lower the opacity of the second layer, and then I merge them together. So that's just generally how I do it. Once again, thank fucking God I did a Greek style dress, because it was incredibly easy to color. Not a whole lot of work needed to go into that. So yeah. Also, I very much like her hair here. It's a little bit too saturated for my taste, but that's sort of the entire point. But it's saturated to such a degree that it reminds me of like Ariel from The Little Mermaid's hair color, like this really bright, intense red. It really shouldn't be that red ever, but like I said, this is supposed to be the ideal version. The version of Amelia that she would make if like limitations were not a thing she had to care about. And now onto the final Amelia. What's really funny about this design is that this is actually what she looks like normally outside of this little thought experiment. So this is like the happy medium between the two other designs, although more closely related to her ideal self than the original very plain Jane sort of version. We'll get to the colors in a second, but here the colors are a sort of middle ground. My colors tend to be not very saturated, but a little bit closer to being saturated, and that's how they normally are, and that's how her colors will end up being. But because they're not so bright, I think it is a little bit easier on the eyes. and maybe bring some level of like realism. I use that word very loosely considering how cartoony my style is. But yeah, also her outfit here is a little bit more complex than either version. Amelia normally is a sort of supermodel type character, so it's always imperative to put her in these elaborate outfits that is a bitch for me to like draw and design and stuff, but it almost always works out because she looks super good in them. And while this outfit isn't like particularly outrageous, it's still, I think, significantly more elaborate than the previous outfits. Even down to her little pencil skirt that she has here. Or whatever type of skirt this is. She might be a model and everything, but I'm not normally into fashion. I'm also not normally into drawing high heels, which was a weird challenge. Amelia is the type of person who would probably wear high heels all the time, even though she's like, I think I made her 5'10", so she's a pretty sizable woman, and yet she's always wearing these high heels, so I guess it matters to be the tallest person in the room. I wouldn't know, I'm very short. But oh yes, now we get to the color parts, which is always the fun bit. So yeah, I like to turn off the line art for certain parts of the coloring process, just so I can get all the little crevices. Because unfortunately I'll go back and discover that like, oh no, I didn't color in like these 3 pixels, and undoing the line art, turning off the line art for a moment to like really get into those places helps a little bit, you know, later down the road, so I don't have to constantly go back and fix all of my mistakes. I can just do it the first time. Yeah, you can also see here that I use a lot of the gradient tool for specifically the face and the shoulders, but for some other parts of the body, of the skin, where I feel like just leaving it like plain would be kind of boring, I will add a little bit of a gradient there, but the more prominent gradient is always like in the face and shoulder areas. I don't know, it just feels like significant for me to do it in those places. Yep, I also try to repeat some of the colors that I've previously used, so I decided to make her outfit mostly like green, just because her eyes are green, so if it was something like purple, I feel like because there's no other things that are purple in her outfit, it would feel a little bit weird to just start throwing that at the wall, so I used green instead. And like different variations of green, because you can see that the shirt is like this, like it's more of a light yellow, green, beige-ish color. I feel like we need more names for colors, because there's a lot of in-betweens that don't necessarily have a name. But I guess after a while it'd just be ridiculous to have like a million different color names. Or there probably are all these color names and I just don't know them because I'm fucking lazy. Oh yeah, and then this is the bullshit backgrounds part. I never know what I'm doing for backgrounds, so it just ends up being me messing with the watercolor. I couldn't think of the word for a second. The watercolor section. So I think maybe now this is a good time to leave while the video is wrapping up. So I hope you guys had a great time, and I hope to see you guys for the next speed paint. Bye!